Hi, I'm Garrett Boatman. Thank you for joining me to help me celebrate the launch of my new novella, Floaters, coming from Stoker Award-winning publisher Crystal Lake Publishing. Floaters. The concept is same as maybe an old 1950s horror movie. Teenagers, teenage gangs in this case, help save the city because the adults are unable to do so. Think of the Blob, for example. Floaters, when I was growing up in Jersey City, floaters were what the police called bodies hauled out of the Hudson and East Rivers. So I decided I would write a story about floaters one day. Those of you who have read my previous novel, Stage Fright, published originally in 1988 by Onyx Press, reissued by Valancourt Books as one of the Paperback from Hell series. Maybe if you've read it, you may remember that the opening chapter involves a dreamy called Floaters. In this case, you have creatures, zombies, coming out of the Hudson River and invading New Jersey and New York. Okay. In this retake, people had told me over the years that it would be a good idea to turn floaters, they'd like to see floaters, as a complete story. Now, I had been researching Victorian literature, Victorian nonfiction, researching the whole period of time, and decided it would be great to turn Floaters into a novella that took place in Victorian London. Dreadpunk, for example. The Thames River, the Big Stink, the part of the city gaslit, parts of it electrified, all the new and the old mixed all together. So, and then I came across a book called Hooligan Nights by Clarence Rook, 1899. And it gave a lot of insight into the workings of hooligan gangs, how to train pickpockets, the younger generation is pickpockets, how to break in entry, how to fool the police, do stakeouts, and so forth. Another interesting book was a book I found that listed a lot of the cases that were brought before the court, and it listed a lot of gang names. So these gangs, I actually used the original names. So a lot of it's based on fact, and the rest, of course, is fiction. Now tonight, I'd like to read a selection from Floaters. In this scene, Will, my protagonist, he's the hooligan gang leader of the Lambeth Lads, and he joins in an uneasy alliance with Police Constable Foley, whom he grew up with, but joined the other side, the law enforcement, to capture a floater. I hope you'll like and share this video after the reading. If you have any questions, please let me know. And of course, you can contact me, message me on Facebook. Garrett Boatman. Okay. Floaters, this is from chapter 4. Across the Thames in Westminster, the clock tower chimed the quarters. Big Ben followed, tolling the hour. 9 o'clock. The river lapped against the water stair. It was less foggy tonight, but the humid air was fraught with chill. They stood on the Vauxhall stairs, adjacent to Lax Lock, between the looming brick hulks of the Royal Flour Mills and the gin and vinegar distillery. The tide was in, the landing below the stair submerged. Descending beside the moss-covered wall, the slippery stone steps disappeared into the water like an invitation to a drowning. A crescent moon broke through the overcast, and for a minute, the river, the opposite embankment, the misty arc of the Vauxhall Bridge, glowed like a luminous monochromatic painting. Then the moon retreated, plunging the river back into darkness. Now what? Foley asked. He insisted on accompanying Will on his quest to capture a floater. Though Will would never admit it, he was glad of the company. Be nice to have someone pull the bogle off if one managed to get on top of you. By way of answering, Will plunked another pebble into the water. When that didn't draw attention, he looked around, found a chunk of broken cobblestone, and lobbed it into the drink. It sank with a loud plunk, accompanied by a spout of water that fell back into the river with a splash. Within seconds, the head broke the surface. The moon was withdrawn, the river darkly glittering, so all he saw was the silhouette of head and shoulders. The creature rose. Over the lapping of the tide against the stair, Will heard the water running off it in rivulets. Then the moon broke through the clouds, dimly illuminating the monstrosity that was even now making its way up the stair, its footfalls a wet splat, splat. The creature was hunched over, long stringy hair matting her face. Her blouse and skirts clung to her bloated frame. The dress swished as the animated dead mounted the stair. Will knew how slippery the stairs were. He imagined how precarious the thing's balance was. If he kicked it, it would probably fall. But he had come here to capture one, not knock it back in the river. He backed away onto the dock, let it come for him. It topped the stair, stepped onto the dock, and still it came, neither fast nor slow, but inexorably, ponderously, as if it were a force of nature approaching, a cold front moving in, a thunderhead lowering over the city, death with no promise of ease. As if they had drilled together, Will and Foley split up. Keeping to either side of the floater, they circled the preternatural horror, keeping just out of reach. Tottering, grasping, swinging its arms in flailing arcs, it lurched now toward one, now toward the other. A watery growl gurgled up from its sodden lungs, as if its fossil brain registered frustration. Will ducked under a flailing arm and drove his chopper into the bundle of nerves he knew to be housed in the armpit. As a boy, he had once ducked under a bully's roundhouse and planted his fist in his pit. The bully howled, and, as if the arm had lost all strength, Will was pleased to see the arm hang useless at the bully's side. It had been a valuable lesson to the young hooligan, seeing that attacking what lay below this flesh was often more effective than wailing away at the outer skin. The strike, which would certainly have rendered a normal person's arm immobile, seemed to have no effect on the creature. Will barely had time to withdraw his blade before the arm came down, nearly trapping his hand. Foley's next move had more luck. While the beast focused on Will, the policeman moved in and drove his heel into the thing's ribs. It floundered, slipped, and arms pinwheeling, went down with a noise like wet laundry hurled to the street. Before it could rise, Foley threw himself on its back, pinning it down. It bucked and heaved. Foley hung on. Ignoring its grasping hands, Will plunged his blade into its eye. He preferred fat blades. But at the moment he wished his knife were a stiletto. The thick wedge of steel burst the eyeball, but lodged against the bone of the socket. The head thrashed. Teeth chomped as a thick goo leaked from the ruptured eye, but no blood. The crack of toe bones snapping was loud as the thing's feet hammered the cement dock. Frustrated, Will plunged the blade into the woman's neck, wrenched it out, severing cartilage, veins, nerves, and muscle. As on the previous night, when he had nearly beheaded the thing eating Tim Peck. The gaping wound did not prove fatal. Rather than expire, the creature redoubled its efforts to rise, to buck Foley from its back. Its hands continued to grasp, its teeth to gnash, its feet to drum a tattoo on the dock. A sound caught Will's attention, a wet, watery sound. A splash, followed by another. From where he crouched, one knee penning a writhing arm, while Foley wrestled to draw the other to its side, he saw first one glistening face, then another, and a third rise into sight as three more of the creatures mounted the stair. "We've got company. We have to go. Hold on." Desperate not to leave empty-handed, Will sawed at the thing's wrist. The gray meat parted as easily as wet cheese, but bone and tendon refused to yield to his blade. The first of the bogles, eyeless and noseless, half its cheek eaten away, hair spidering its forehead, teeth and fingers working, stepped onto the dock. "Will, hold on!" More out of frustration than from any conscious design, Will placed his blade in the joint between the thing's hand and wrist, and putting his boot on the back of the blade, stomped. Hand and wrist severed with a grisly parting of tendon and bone. Will's blade grated against concrete. Will jumped back as the hand scuttled toward him. All three floaters were on the dock now, 2 men and a woman, water streaming from their sopping clothes. Perhaps the dead possessed the keen sense of smell, because, blind or not, they advanced straight for the living. Behind them, 2 more emerged from the steps. Will stabbed the hand, and with it writhing on his blade, he shouted, "Come on!" and sprinted for the narrow passage that ran between the factories to the street. Foley fairly leapt from the creature's back and followed. In the next scene, they take the severed hand to the St. Thomas Pathology Lab, where a professor, the Foley knows, does a little vivisection and analysis, as it were. So, that's the reading. Hope you all enjoyed it. And don't forget to leave comments, share this video, and check out all the great books that Crystal Lakes Publishing has to offer. In the near future, I have another book that will be coming out. It's called Knight's Plutonian Shore, the first in a trilogy. And it'll be published by J. Ellington Ashton Press sometime in the near future, in the next few months. No set release date yet. So thank you once again. Take care. Good night.